Life isn't perfect, and neither are we.
Nope. But we know how to face our fears
And have some fun.
and talk about all the messiest things of life.
Like the messiest things.
Get connected to yourself, get connected to others, and get connected to the life right in front of you.
This is The Connected Life with Justin and Abi.
That's me.
That's you.
And you.
Hey, Abs, how you doing?
I'm doing the best.
Yeah.
'Cause I'm with my lover.
Yeah, except you don't know how to create banter. Let's talk about how Abby doesn't know how to banter.
I really don't. I never know what we should talk about in the beginning when we start.
Yeah.
I leave it all entirely up to you.
When I think of you and your ability or lack of ability to banter, it reminds me of Will Ferrell in Talladega Nights, and he's being interviewed, and all of a sudden his hands are wide open in front of him, and they're interviewing him, asking him about the race, and his hands just slowly float up into the air, and they're like, "What are you doing?" He's like, "I don't know what to do with my hands," and he's just. And I feel like when I get you in front of the mic to banter, you're like, "Oh, what am I doing? My hands are just floating in front of my face."
That's real. To be honest, I fully rely on your banter capacity.
You do. It's all on me.
It's all on you.
And then I rely on you to look pretty.
Oh, see, it works out.
Notice that
We
I
made
didn't
a good
say
agreement.
I rely on you to say anything smart.
I'm going to punch you.
Oh my
If you're
gosh.
just tuning in, we have a great sense of humor where Justin degrades me and I laugh.
Oh, as if you don't make fun of
I'm
me.
kidding. I'm joking. We do have a sense of humor where
We're sarcastic and playful with each other, but it's
only-
not to cut each other down.
it's only about things we don't believe.
There's no truth in it.
There's
Like,
no truth.
I actually think she's brilliant.
I know. And he says it all the time, and he says it publicly all the time.
Yeah.
And I swoon a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think here's the other thing. When Justin puts so much love in the bank account, like he tells me, he verbally affirms me so often about how great I am at things that when he makes jokes, it never feels like, oh no, is that what he really thinks? I'm like, no, you've told me I'm smart like 10 times.
You
this
love
week.
me so much, I'll let you bully me.
No, I just know there's no
That sounds
truth.
awesome too.
No.
Yeah, no. But there's no truth in it.
There's no truth in it.
Anyways.
You can get away with a lot when you affirm somebody a bunch.
You really can. You really can.
You've learned the
So,
trick.
We also don't, there's never any actual digs at each
Yeah,
other.
we don't use passive aggressive humor.
No. Like if I have something to say, I'm going to be like, look, I got a problem with you.
Look, you're being a real idiot. That's what you'd say.
I don't think I'd tell you you're an idiot. I don't think that would go over well.
What would you try?
Hey, guys out there listening,
Don't
try
that.
Unless you want to sink your battleship.
Yep.
Wah, wah, wah.
No, but you will be real
Justin calls
straightforward.
his wife an idiot, darling.
I can do it too.
Have you ever heard Abby say it's fine? I just have to affirm you 5 times, idiot.
You're the best. You're cute. You're pretty. You smell good. It's fine, right?
Uh-huh.
That's
Uh-huh.
funny.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what are we going to talk about today?
We are going to talk about something that is a big deal.
I don't it feels like you're trying to oversell it. Like, excitement, big deal. Maybe it's
Oh.
not that big of a deal. I mean, it only affects every part of our life.
It does.
She's like, wait, it is a big deal.
No,
She's
I was
giving me this
literally
face.
thinking that. I was like, where are you going
why,
with this?
Why wouldn't this
No,
be a
it
big
is
deal?
a big
I
deal.
can't
I'm not
oversell this.
overestimating
We're going
it.
to talk about dads.
Dads.
Dads affect everything. They
everything.
They can make or break your entire life. And if they didn't do things well, then you're just screwed.
Wouldn't that be an encouraging
This
podcast?
podcast is really going
If
downhill.
you weren't born in the right circumstances, you have no hope for your future.
Uh-huh. Well, part of
That's
us...
such a great victim statement.
Yeah, it totally is. Well, there's a subconscious thing that happens with dads.
Yeah.
Like, you don't even know that your dad has affected your life. You're just doing life.
That's true.
And a lot of people come into my office and they'll be like... I mean, for lack of better words, they're like, my dad was a superhero. He was perfect. I don't have dad problems. And I'm like, yeah.
Do they talk like that? Is that what they sound
I
like?
don't have dad problems.
I don't have a dad problem. I'm going to come to session with you. Hi, I have some issues that I want to talk about. Just like that the whole time.
Yeah. So, but people totally play off things with their dad. They're just so unaware of dad stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you don't have dad wounds, but you're totally lighting fire to your entire marriage. Is that just because it just, you like setting fire to things that are good?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people aren't aware how much our childhood actually creates a map for our future. And if we aren't intentional,
Yeah.
it will drive the map for the rest of our lives.
Yeah, that map will drive you.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
what
yeah,
I
yeah.
say is it's subconscious. Your subconscious belief system is formed when you are a child. So however your mom and dad meet your needs, however your existence is, you actually begin to create beliefs that these are the rules of life. This is just how life is. So if your dad gives you tons of attention, you believe
Then you're like, everybody loves me. They're going to give me attention. I'm the best ever.
Yeah.
And then you're happy and interactive and connective to authority figures.
Yeah. And so for the rest of your life, you show up in a certain way with authorities and they respond to that. So it's like self-fulfilling prophecies where over and over again, we interact out of what is normal for us.
Yeah.
So let's share just both me and you have a different experience with favor in this area.
Well, I do want to say this, and
Okay.
I would assume at this point, everyone who listens to us understands our subconscious beliefs driving our life. But if you
yeah.
don't,
Okay, great.
subconscious belief system is what drives all of our decision making. It's like the computer programming inside of our life.
Like the iOS.
In which the latest update, I was like, forget you, Apple.
You feel
I
that
am
every
done.
update.
I do.
You're like a rebel.
You're just trying to drain my battery and make me buy
Totally.
another phone.
Totally. That's real.
Anyways, so the iOS is running in the background. And so if we're having results, like I have people come in all the time whose life is just like, it's in chaos over here. Or I'm not making enough money over
Or
here.
this one event keeps happening. Friendships
Over and
keep
over
doing
again,
this to
falling
me.
apart. I
Or
don't
guys always
understand.
break up with me for this reason.
So if our beliefs actually drive our life and dictate the outcome, wouldn't it be nice to know what the beliefs are, where they came from, and how to change them?
So that you don't have to keep replicating.
Right. So you can actually create like the life that you want, change things up.
And that's the story of our life is us both. I mean, when we found out we were powerful, it changed the game for both of us, changed the amount of torment we were in. And what I mean by powerful
Yeah,
is,
I was going to say elaborate on the word powerful.
Yeah. So what I mean by powerful is, when I actually recognize the belief system I have in my life has navigated me to where I'm at.
Totally.
Which means I can change my belief system and it will navigate me to a different outcome.
Which, by the way, as a side note, is one of the most, for someone who feels powerless to life, is one of the most hopeless statements initially. Because they're like, oh God, I made all this happen and this is horrible. I can't believe I have so much shame. I feel horrible that I made this life. There's nothing I can do to get out of it. And I'm like, if you can create it, you can rewrite it. And if you can I tell people, if you could create something this crappy because of your subconscious beliefs that haven't been dealt with, imagine the magnificent wonder world you can create if you actually choose to change them.
Absolutely.
So this is a day about talking about awareness and being deliberate and finding out,
understanding why we do what we do and how to create a new life.
So mothers and fathers both play a vital role inside of this.
Huge role.
But we're going to specifically just aim the gun at fathers.
So I wanted to talk just when we're talking about the map. So here's what I tell people. Every human has core human desires: to be loved, to be known, to be seen, to be wanted,
I don't
chosen,
need any
worthy,
of
to have affection, we have a huge list that we teach in our course.
Yeah.
There's a lot of things people want. And what happens is, as a kid, you learn which of those will actually get met and which of them won't. And you create beliefs and protectors around it. So let's say every kid desires to feel special. If you learn that you're not going to feel special, you create protectors to protect you. How am I going to make people see that I'm special?
Or I don't
care that I'm not special.
I don't care that I'm not special.
Yeah. So we have something that we do in order to solve the issue of we had this want that we wanted and we didn't know how to get it met.
Yep.
Okay. So I want you to just share about like men with you. I'm going to share men with me. So when I grew up.
Well, let me go first.
Okay.
So for me, I had this whole relationship with male authority figures where we did not gel well together. Ever. It wasn't a buddy-buddy system. Male authority figures, when they came into my world, it was like rubbing sandpaper against sandpaper.
Ugh.
Yes. And then rubbing it against a chalkboard. And so there would constantly be some sort of aggression, disconnection, frustrations. I would always walk away feeling like they don't care about me, they're rejecting me.
And so I had like a very different situation in my life where
Vastly different.
male authority figures like loved me.
Abby's the best ever.
Oh yeah, they wanted
Time,
to pour
attention.
into me. They wanted to believe in me and empower me. And so it was really interesting watching the contrast of our lives.
Yeah.
Where like we're tied together and we both love people, and yet here I get so much connection and you get none.
Totally.
And so what is it that created understanding for you?
Well, I just realized that's just the way life is. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
Yep.
Which is one of the number one things that people say.
Oh, totally.
When they have problems like this, that's just the way life is.
Yeah.
So, what now you're saying what created solutions for me?
Yeah.
So for me, there was this really strong awareness when I realized that my subconscious was driving my life, my belief system was driving it, where I started the process of going, where did that come from? Like, why? What is the world of male authority figures reflecting to me about my history? And I start digging into it, and all of a sudden, like this blaring, like blinking red light, it's like, wah, 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 and it's pointing right at my dad.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is exactly like my relationship with my dad.
Right. So you had a map from your childhood of how men would respond to you.
Yep.
What was it?
Well, that men wouldn't have time for me.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't care what I had to say.
Mm-hmm.
They would feel like I was a burden.
Mm-hmm.
They
wouldn't understand you.
Didn't understand me well. Really frustrated with me if I did have to ask questions. So really, yeah.
So what happened is, as a kid, you experience all of these things, and you subconsciously create a map that this is how men will respond to me.
Totally.
And so you start to recognize, oh, that is my belief system.
Oh, yeah, and it's wreaking complete havoc on my life, and now I'm going to have to look and figure out what to do about it.
And so what'd you do?
Well, I think before we talk about what I did, maybe you can share a little bit about yours as well.
Yeah.
And then I'd like to share like history with my dad, if that's okay.
Yeah.
You good with that?
Yeah.
Well, a little bit about my relationship with me and my dad. Part of what I did about this whole thing is I started reflecting on my whole history.
Yeah, this is actually when I think you recognized you had dad issues.
Mm-hmm. Because, like, I had two extreme emotions. One, I really, like, in some ways, I just really loved my dad. In ways, I really just hated him.
Yeah.
Hated him. And I was like, why do I have this hatred towards my father?
Right.
And as a kid, my dad really wanted to spend a lot of time with me. But what I didn't realize is that the time that he wanted to spend was really on his terms.
Right.
Or it perceived in his terms. Because I was a kid who was like, I want to play some video games. And I had these interests over here in action figures, things like that. Which Nerd. Which, by the way, the two action figures my dad bought me are my favorite action figures ever because it felt like he jumped inside of my world.
Totally.
But my dad wanted to have special moments. So he wanted to take me hunting, fishing, camping. Like, he wanted to do all kinds of stuff like that, which none of it appealed to me whatsoever, especially because when I got out and would go participate in those things with him, he'd be like lost looking out into the, like, we're out hunting and he's like, oh, I think there's deer on that hill, and we're driving for 2 hours and he's just like looking around.
Right. And so you're not like, we're not connecting.
Yeah. And I wouldn't know how to say, like, I need connection. It feels like I'm just along for your ride.
Right.
So I'm not experiencing you. I don't know anything. And I realize I don't know much about dad. But with dad, you know, dad brought me to work and I'd work with him. And at work, oftentimes, like, he would show me how to do something. He'd be like, oh, this is how you need to do it. And he'd explain it, but it never made sense to me.
Right.
Because my dad specifically was one of the youngest master electricians that ever got his master's license in Montana after getting his accounting degree. So he's brilliant, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he'd have these discussions with me with language that was way over my head.
Oh, 100%.
It's like that. It's like the guy, the nerdy computer guy who sits down and starts telling you like all these things about, you just take the code from this and you put it in. And you're going, what?
That's how I feel with all my life being dyslexic. I'm just kidding.
Right?
I'm totally kidding.
So there's this language that he's using that's way over my head. And progressively, in his inability to feel like he could teach me and get me to get it, he would get more aggressive, more frustrated. What? Listen to me. Listen to the words I'm saying and do it. And I'm like, I don't understand the words.
Right.
Yeah, I can hear them, but I don't understand them individually. So what I watched is I was on this progressive journey with my dad, being around him all the time, and he would be frustrated when I couldn't get to a conclusion enough, but then not set me up for success. And then when I felt like I needed to ask more questions, it continually felt like it was this growing burden experience.
Yeah.
Almost like, oh, Dad, I'm a burden to Dad in this space.
Absolutely.
And I watched my dad, in my relationship with my mom had a lot of conversations about my dad as if Dad didn't care about her.
Right.
And very much so didn't care about us.
Right.
So now that Dad and I don't relate on hunting, fishing, golfing, all the key things that he loves doing, it feels like Dad chooses his stuff over here. There's Dad's world and then there's our world. We're not included in Dad's world.
You guys.
He doesn't care about me whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the bigger picture of how all of a sudden I'm relating to men in general, thinking, if I share this, if I need more help from you, you're going to be frustrated. And, a conversation my dad used to say often, which is interesting how some things can be empowering and at the same time devastating.
Totally.
So he'd be like, Justin, take some time to go think on it and you'll figure it out.
Oh gosh.
So go figure it out.
Oh, that's so much pressure.
Now, in one way, it's actually a very empowering statement that can be written into the human soul or the child's soul. To like, oh, if I take some time and look at it, I can figure this out, which is interesting because it was hidden subconsciously inside of me as well. And it eventually manifested itself in my life where after I cleared clutter, I got to, oh my God, my dad always really trusted me to figure it out. And I did figure it out and I can really do great things. And I am powerful. Like that happened. But the overarching thing above that is, oh, I'm a burden when I need help. So I have to do everything all on my own and I don't know how to figure it out.
Absolutely.
So it was this weird mixture. So anyways.
Well, and that's where fathering then started to affect every area of your life. Career, finances, like there's so many areas.
Oh, yeah.
It was, like, talk about that.
Well, yeah, I'm watching how can I talk about the good and the bad in this? So I watched my dad specifically inside of his job because he used to tell me, my dad didn't teach me how to do stuff. He sent me out and said, go figure it out. And he's like, I don't know how to teach like that. And I just assume that you can figure it out because I did. And so I watched my dad be very powerful when it came to his career.
Right.
In the sense of
figure it out.
He was always the smartest guy on any job and he could run circles around everyone. In fact, he had to slow down tremendously. And I know that basically my dad thought everyone was idiots.
It's true.
But it's because
it's hard being a genius.
And that's the reality. My dad actually has genius qualities to him.
Totally.
And so I watched this one side of like, oh, I can be the most powerful person in any room.
Yeah.
And that was something that built in and manifested itself again, a part of it that came out of me later on in life where I'll walk into rooms and be like, I can probably be the most powerful person in here.
Absolutely.
And so there's good parts of that. The other part of it though, that was really negative in the career area is that he didn't ask for help. So my dad didn't know how to build teams around him of people and invite people into the process. So he lived with way more stress. So I've had to battle inside of my career this idea of like, oh my God, I have to do all this on my own. There's no one strong enough to run with me. And Abby's over here with a team of people all running. And I'm like, she's way less smart than me and needs more help. This doesn't make sense.
But I could accomplish more because I had a team.
Well, how'd I say that? She's way less smart than me. No, I what I meant was, I said that wrong. She's over here and she needs
more help.
She needs more help. So she has more help. It's not that you weren't smarter than me.
No.
It's just that you were like, oh, I need help. All right, I'm going to just surround people around me. And so you're accomplishing way more, even though I have way more capacity on this side.
100%.
Yeah, that's how I want to say it.
Because your dad, you learned a lot. Like, I have to do this on my own. And I've seen, like, it actually created a lot of emotional stress for you.
Totally. I'm feeling totally abandoned. And
when you would face issues in our marriage, or you would, I mean, you even shared this in a session recently we had with a counselor where you were like, oh, I just thought I had to figure out this issue on my own.
Yeah.
Like, I thought I had to be able to figure it out. So you probably spent hours and hours and hours digging for an emotional solution.
Probably hundreds of hours.
Yeah. Trying to find, and even so in career, I've seen you do that before. In finances, like in every area of your life, I've seen in the past, because of what you learned from fathering, which is I can't depend on anyone. I can't ask anyone. I have to do it myself. You've carried more stress and more fear and more burden than you ever needed.
Which is one of the largest battles that men face in general.
Yes.
Is literally that wound, that problem with fathering, and they drag it into marriage and career and fathering their own children. And so they're not reaching out going, hey, there's got to be someone bigger than me that can help me with this. And
then it creates chaos. Like, we could have easily had somebody help us in our marriage in the issue you were talking about.
Probably 9 years ago.
100%.
Instead, I've been my own pain in the ass because I didn't do that.
Totally. But this is what we're saying is most people aren't aware. I mean, I think it took you really in the last like 4 years, I think, is when you realize how much of a Lone Star mentality you had from childhood.
Totally. And so, I mean, and there's other parts of how my dad with money, I watched my dad be incredible at saving money, and to really like give him the biggest, attaboy slap on the butt. I went to college and I borrowed money from him to go to college. Like, I worked all through the summers. I always worked as a kid, worked through the summers, but I borrowed money to go to college, and I was going to pay it all back instead of paying the insane prices of the loans to some company.
The
interest rates and everything. My dad, the day I graduated, handed me a card, and in it said debt free.
Yeah.
Go on and make your dreams happen.
Which is
amazing. It wrecked me. It was amazing. On the other side,
you had paid some of it though. As you
I had paid it. Yeah,
you were paying as you. I
was paying some large chunks of money for a young guy in his early 20s.
Yeah.
Like, I was definitely super responsible in that. But even watching the way my dad managed money, it wasn't just he put money away. He had a fear of money, like not having enough.
Right.
So then that part of it though bled into me having this deep fear, like there's not going to be enough in the future.
So I feel alone. I have to figure it all out on my own. And also there's never going to be enough.
Totally. And so I watched even my dad with like marriage. Here's another great example. My mom, like, she'll openly discuss, I was super crazy. I was out of control.
I think actually both of your parents have said, I ruined this family.
Yeah. They've been beautiful at taking responsibility and going, I failed miserably in mothering, fathering, and in these areas.
Yeah.
But again, places they succeeded incredibly well. I watched my dad choose my mom the entire marriage.
In her crazy.
Yeah. I mean, my dad had his own crazy, right?
Totally.
Both of them were being powerless to each other, all this stuff. But really, my dad was like, I love this woman. I'm going to be dedicated to this woman. And that's something that's so poured into like my heart with you.
Yeah.
To come hell or high water in the sickness with your body. Like my mom was sick physically for so long, and my dad stood right by her side. And
I know. That's one of the most incredible gifts that I was given, because it was normal to you. Your subconscious belief system was already set up to be able to love me through crazy physical issues without even knowing that.
Yeah.
Not to say that if you don't, again, we're not saying if you don't have a past that sets you up for that, you can't choose that. That's literally what we're saying. Whatever you had in the past, you can choose what you want your future to be. But there's good and bad maps from our kids.
You can totally rewrite it. So, but inside a marriage, I also watched my dad go bury his head and just be like, oh, she's being intense. I'm just going to go over here and try and escape this as much as possible. So you
learned hopelessness.
I learned a lot of powerlessness and hopelessness in regards to relating in marriage and relating to femininity.
Oh yeah.
Like it doesn't matter
I'm never going to be heard.
It doesn't matter how much I love, no matter how much I try, she's still going to be dissatisfied. what's the point monster. Really, it was underlying.
And there was he was never like, let's go to counseling. Let's figure out how to work on this. Let's get help.
Because he thought he had to do it on. In fact, recently I actually confronted him on that in a very loving way. We were doing a dialogue. He was being very vulnerable. And I just said, hey man, you have a relationship with isolation that says I have to do this all on your own and and that's why these things are currently happening. And as I broke it down for him, he's like, yeah, oh my gosh, yeah, you're right. That's real. I don't, because I basically said, why don't you give me a phone call and ask for, maybe I could ask for me to direct you on where to go with some of this stuff, whether it's personally or I direct you towards someone. And he's like, I could do that. I said, I'm a professional in this area. You're a professional in electrical. That's why your phone gets blown up every time I have an issue with electricity around the house.
100%.
So it bled into that. And, it bleeds into identity. Ultimately, because there's a conversation about me as a man, just my masculinity. What does this mean about me as a man after watching my dad and his behavior?
Yeah, I think you've really gone on the journey of like, so what does it mean to be powerful? What are the ways my dad showed that he was powerful in healthy ways? And what are the ways he didn't show it in healthy ways? It feels like you've had to go on the journey of what does masculinity look like and mean? Because there were some pieces you saw from him, but a lot of pieces that you needed to actually figure out outside of him.
Yep. And so other areas, and I'm not going to go into the depth of these, but it pours into God, like what we believe to be true about God, parenting, sexuality, emotions in general. You can talk a little bit about some of those as well if you want on your end.
Yeah,
in sharing
absolutely.
Your story.
Okay, you want me to jump in now?
You can if you want, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, we're just kind of sharing overviews. I have a really great relationship with my dad now. My relationship with my dad has been kind of complicated, which I would say probably is pretty normal with lots of people. My parents' marriage really affected my relationship with my dad. So I was really close to my mom, and my dad had anger issues. And so let me explain my experience, and then I'll explain reality, because this is something helpful to know. Like, your experience doesn't actually necessarily mean it's real.
Totally.
Like, what I experienced was different than their intentions. Let's say that.
Yeah.
What I experienced was real, but it wasn't necessarily their intentions, what they wanted me to experience. So when I was a really young kid, I hated my dad. Actually, when I was really young, me and my dad were like really good buddies. Probably around like 7 or 8 or teenage years, somewhere around there, started hating him because he was because me and my mom were really close, and my dad and my mom were at war.
Yeah.
So I'm on her team. It's us versus him. And so even all the anger she has
That's what it felt like
him,
with my mom and I and my dad.
Yeah. So all the anger she has with him, she's pulled me over onto her side. Like, one of the things you can do is, if you don't have a healthy marriage, don't pull your kids into villainizing the other person. No. Don't use them to validate your feelings, because everybody wants to feel validated. And so my mom wants, like, when we can both be like, yeah, I hate when he does that to me too. I hate when it's like that. Then you can feel like you have somebody on your team. And that feels so validating when your partner won't validate you. But really all it does is destroy your kids. Like, kids are not meant to have to choose teams. They're not meant to have to decide that one. I mean, maybe not the worst. There's worse things, but yeah, it's a very difficult
It's very
thing.
destructive, especially because this is as a side note, I am 50% my mom, 50% my dad. So when we eradicate one of the parents, we're eradicating part of our child.
Oh, 100%. So if somebody says, I hate your dad, then every way that I'm like my dad,
I hate you,
is now judged. Yep. Even though that's a subconscious thing.
Right.
People don't, I didn't consciously think that when I was a little kid.
Right.
But it does begin to bleed over into your view. So I hated my dad because my mom villainized him, and my dad had anger issues, and so there was a lot of disconnection and frustration. And then as I got older, what ended up happening is that super enmeshed relationship I had with my mom got broken up into a healthy relationship where she was no longer the superhero. That's normally what we do. There's a superhero and there's a villain.
Yeah.
And so that's not true of anyone. There's no superheroes.
There's no villains.
There's just multiple villains. Like, both my parents were villains, turned out.
All right. I mean, to be fair, there is people who
are genuinely villains.
Genuinely act like villains.
Yes. Yeah,
but
yeah.
normally there's not a superhero and a villain. There's just humans being messy.
Totally. So what happened was, as my relationship with my mom began to break up that codependency, that enmeshment. I mean, like, I slept with my mom till I was 12, which is so unhealthy. So unhealthy.
Yeah.
And there was so much emotional connection. So anyway, as that began to break, my relationship with my dad slowly changed, and we had to work through a lot of things. Like, we had hard conversations and confrontations for a few years.
Wow.
I mean, probably a decade. But it ended up like evolving to where I was able to see a much more full picture. And now I can look back and be like, okay, my mom was mentally ill. I didn't understand that as a kid. So my dad's anger makes more sense to me. He was terrified that my mom was destroying my life with her craziness. Right. My mom was terrified that my dad was destroying my life with his craziness. So they were both trying to protect me. So I can look back and see their intentions were to protect me and make sure I was okay. But my feelings as a kid were not like that. I felt like, you always fight over me. I'm the biggest problem in your world. You're always angry. The house is at war constantly. I'm the only person that's sane here. You both are out of your minds. I need to be in control. And so as the picture unfolded, recognizing like, I understand why my dad was angry. And we had the conversation that was really helpful because he was so angry, it felt like I could never be enough to make him happy. And there's cycles you can get in. My dad did say mean things. And I remember my mom didn't say as mean of things. And so I became a lot more of what my dad said. That being said, there was a lot of really good things that my dad said. But I think a lot of really good things my dad did. But one of the things I think is that going on the journey of healing has enabled me to now, I think I have a really healthy perspective. So now I don't, like, for years I would have said I hate my dad. I have a hard relationship with him. I worked on it in counseling for years and years and years. I worked on all my dad issues, and there were reasons. And then I confronted him for a long time, and we worked through stuff. And then I got to a realistic place of looking at him and realistically seeing who he was and who he wasn't.
Yeah.
You're never going to be these things, but you are going to be these things. And once I've been able to look at all of it, I kind of say, like, people, after you have a breakup, you either villainize or superhero the relationship. So it's either like, they were horrible the whole time, I'm so glad I'm out. Or, oh my gosh, that was the best, I should date them again. It's all
fantastical, and you make a fantasy
You
out
either
of it,
remember the good or the bad. And I think for us, both of our healing processes have led to us being able to hold the good and the bad together.
Yeah.
To actually be
like beautiful tension.
Yeah, like, hey, there was some really, because when I was going through all of the things that were hard for me with my dad, you kind of just shut off towards them, and you're not receiving the love that they are giving you.
Right.
And I think it's an important process. You have to grieve. We always say, like, you have to acknowledge what you missed, acknowledge what hurt you, acknowledge the pain that was caused, and then you have to grieve. Like, okay, I grieve that my dad wasn't able to meet my needs this way. I grieve that he couldn't love me in this way. I grieve that we had this disconnection. And then acceptance. I can accept where my dad realistically is, so I'm not going to be constantly hurt. Yeah. I'm going to actually accept, like, this is who he is, so that then I can enjoy and get love from the areas that he's really good. Because I found that as I walked through the healing process, there are all these ways that my dad loved me as a kid that I had never gotten to receive.
Yeah.
I'd never gotten to feel loved by, because the anger or the pain or the rejection or the self-protection was in the way of me seeing the good things.
Yeah.
And so this is one of the reasons that I think going on a journey of understanding your heart with your dad is so vitally important, because it's actually awakened me to love that was there that I wasn't aware of.
Right. I call that collecting love nuggets, mining for love, like mining for gold, but mining for love. And so when you're not willing to just look at the messiness or the potential messiness that you're unaware of, there's a whole childhood that you could just say, I don't know, I just never felt loved, but my family was great, I guess. everything seemed pretty perfect, but I just never felt loved. And really, as you start digging down, you go, oh no, you actually didn't feel loved because there was pain in this area. And the pain in this area that's unresolved is actually like creating a shadow that is masking all these special moments that actually really mattered. But also, the love, there's a lot of love that if people aren't aware of the pain and they're like, no, I was totally loved. Here's all the love that was there. They can feel a level, like, how do I put it? It's like shallow love. Yeah. Like the fullness of the depth of the love isn't actually really felt. It's very surface level because there's pain under it that's unresolved that they won't look at it. So they just go, I felt super loved. You probably didn't. You probably felt loved. Right. But you're not feeling the depth of that love because there's blockages hiding under it.
And you can remove the blockages and then actually get to connect to that love and healing. Totally. So for me, as I was growing up, my dad, some of the ways he imprinted on me in different areas, I'm going to talk about that. So my dad, he was so good at teaching me. I think he was dyslexic or ADHD when he was growing up and no one taught him. So actually very similar to your dad, but different approaches because it was so painful to my dad that no one taught him. He went
above and beyond and really was proactive with you.
Yes, he helped teach me he spent hours teaching me. And sometimes it was horrible. Like when he was teaching me math, he didn't know I was dyslexic. I would cry every day for an hour straight how he taught me. So it was kind of traumatizing, but he didn't give up. Right. And it eventually helped. And so there was this idea that I had growing up that people would help me. Like I had an innate belief people want to help me. And so that's something that's really beautiful. I think even about career is he changed careers when I was in third grade. And so there was some level of me believing it's okay if I don't know what I'm doing yet. My dad was in his 40s, probably maybe 45 when he decided to go back to school. And he already had a master's degree when he decided to go back to school. And so I think it kind of gave me this, like, it's not high stakes. You can figure it out at any age. And if you make a mistake, you can keep growing. So I really loved that. Yeah. But my dad also had a lot of defeat about career and money and things working out. So anytime I would tell him an idea, he would tell me all of the reasons that wouldn't work out.
That's not going to work. That's too difficult.
And there was a lot of disappointment from him in his life. And so he would tell me that. And so I had to really unlearn, and this is how it affects your marriage. I think people don't understand, 90% of your issues with your spouse are actually with your parents.
Totally. And childhood experiences.
Whatever
that is. It could be parents or authority figures in general, grandpa, grandma, teachers.
You will hate whatever partner you're with if you don't work on your own issues from your childhood.
Absolutely.
Forever. But so I remember with Justin, there was so many times where he came to me with ideas and my initial reaction.
Oh, you were a dick.
My initial reaction would be to tell him every reason why that couldn't work.
Oh, that's not going to work. That's already been done. And I would be like, oh my God, I can't even dream.
Totally. You're like, I don't even have room to verbally process. And I'm like, no, this is just what you do because this is what I had learned. Right. This was a part of my map and it showed up at that. And even the way that my dad affected our marriage, one of the ways that, he was also, I would say he was very similar to your dad in that way. My mom was crazy and my dad loved her consistently. Did not leave, he was
very faithful. He has this beautiful gift of faithfulness.
Yes, he's very faithful. Very similar to your dad.
And it's a beautiful part of his character.
Yeah. And
when he decides something, he goes, okay,
he's in it.
I'm doing
for
this.
The long haul.
Yeah.
So I would say both me and you, that's one of the reasons our marriage has worked. We've had a lot of pain and we've had to work through a lot of stuff, but both of us had this belief. Yeah. No, we're going to stick this out. We're going to fight for this. We're going to keep trying.
Whether it was just pure stubbornness and I have to win this situation.
Yes.
Or I love you.
Absolutely.
I'm not giving
this.
up. Uh-huh.
And so that was really beautiful that he did that. But then there's lots of ways, his reaction to feeling powerless was anger. And because of his anger, I made a vow when I was a kid. I've talked about this before. I'll never let a man's anger run over me. Yeah. And so when we got married, I have this huge vow anytime you're angry that now if I didn't have that vow, which I was really reacting to my dad.
Yeah.
Then it would, and then another area, I remember we were in a counseling session years ago and, we were talking through how you didn't feel like your apology was enough ever.
Yeah. I was
the
like
way
I
you
apologize. Like, and as a side note, I grew up in a childhood, using my dad as an example.
Yeah.
My dad didn't apologize for anything once until recently.
Right.
And it was a damn good apology I got out of him. But I didn't get any of that. So I didn't even have it modeled. But off the bat, I apologize for everything all the time. I was willing to do that.
Yeah.
Right. And so I was.
So you're I am radically different than
I am radically different than my father. I didn't get a sorry from my dad, my mom, from my grandma, grandpa. There's nobody.
Heard apologies.
I don't even know if I ever got an apology my whole childhood from anybody.
Aww.
So I'm just throwing apologies out left and right.
And so you feel like, this is insane.
Oh, yeah.
I've never apologized so much.
Yeah. Especially when all I want to do is just walk out the door and set fire to the house behind me as I go. I'm like, nope, I'm going to go apologize and work through this.
That's funny. Now, just for all of you people out there to not get envious, there's lots of ways he didn't take ownership for things and wasn't. I don't want them to think, oh, well, if I just married a man who took ownership for everything like Justin Stumbaugh, that's not true.
Yeah.
He was great at apologizing in some areas and not great in other ways, just like me.
Justin
I'm great at
Stumbaugh
apologizing.
is a huge pain in the ass. So don't compare your men to me.
Oh, 100%. I'm like, listen, don't be in there being like, I wish my husband was like that. You've got
or
as
my
many
boyfriend or anything.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, but so my dad, when I was younger, now he's great when I confront him now.
Yeah.
He's amazing. And I remember the first time like he took ownership and apologized was when we'd been married in my later 20s. So, but I remember when I'd confront him as a kid or say something, he'd just be like, well, look at me. Aren't I the worst dad ever? I'm so bad at being a dad. And it would just be this sarcastic, cutting thing. And that'd be the end of it, you know?
Yeah.
And so, so I came in with this map that like, you don't really mean it.
Yeah. Thanks for
like,
nothing, Jack.
What you're saying, you don't actually mean
what you're saying.
And so what we're trying to do is give you guys examples of how our map of how we view life and how we show up to it is so created by our childhood.
So what happened though with that? So you'd come in, I would come to you and I'd say, I'm really sorry for this. And I'd say it a couple of different ways. You'd be like, you're not sorry. Do you really mean it? Why are you sorry? Well, I don't think you're really sorry. And I'd be like, oh my God, I just spent the last 5 minutes trying to explain to you how I'm sorry.
Totally.
But then what it created was this discord and disconnection. And again,
and it had nothing, you couldn't win and I couldn't win.
Yeah. Because the battle wasn't with us.
Yep.
It wasn't about the circumstance. It was about history.
Absolutely. The battle was with history. And I would say most of what people's battles are currently in life is actually a battle with their history. In some way, whatever they're facing is reminding them or triggering them or showing up like a situation. And and that's why people feel like they can't get breakthrough and move forward in life.
I call it boxing shadows.
Okay. Explain it.
You're boxing shadows. You're punching a shadow. You're trying to punch out a shadow and conquer a shadow. The shadow is not the problem. It's the figure that the shadow's being cast by. Right? So you have this figure that's casting this shadow. Your dad or your mom, your history is casting a shadow out here. And so you're punching over and over again at the shadow.
Air.
You're hitting air. And what happens is you get deeply, deeply exhausted. And you go, there's no point.
I'm never going to win. I can never change anything.
I can never change anything. The shadow won't go away. It's because you're punching a shadow, not the actual issue.
Absolutely. So another area that I can see that my dad really affected was how I viewed God. And so and this is I think every human, Paul Young, he's the guy who wrote The Shack, says this. It took him 50 years to wipe the face of his father off the face of God. Mm-hmm. And that feels so realistic. And, I've been around so many cultures where they're like, I already dealt with all my dad issues. I'm like, I doubt it. Because there's like so many layers that I've worked on my dad issues. I started counseling at 12, and there's still moments when things pop up. And I would say
clearly that was a waste of your money.
Well, what I'm saying is I actually do feel like we've worked through a lot. And I would say I feel really good with where we are, but there's still pockets or moments where something happens and I recognize like, oh no, this is another thing I need to look at. And I don't feel shame, and I don't feel like the past was invalid. Whenever the pain comes up, I'm like, oh, this is so much less than it was 10 years ago. This is so much less than it was 20 years ago. So I never feel like it's in vain. I think people feel shame if something comes up, especially people who are like, no, I've worked through that.
Yeah.
I've worked through that already.
I already got that taken
And so if
care
you're
of.
telling me that it still exists, that means that what I did doesn't count.
Right.
And that's never the truth.
No.
It's just an invitation to have less pain in your bucket.
Healing is progressive. Freedom is progressive. It's that simple. Freedom
so I remember
is progressive.
I got to a place where me and my dad were in a really the best part of our relationship. And my dad ended up deciding to divorce my mom. And I have a lot of compassion on it. He took care of her. She was mentally ill and stubborn, and he did everything.
I don't even think the word stubborn. Like, there's something that's very much stronger than stubborn by about 10,000 times that.
Totally. And it was, and I get it. And he did everything. He cooked, he cleaned, he did the laundry, he did the errands, he took her to doctor's appointments, he worked full time. Like, he did everything in their life for 40 years. Yeah. I mean, she probably did stuff for the first maybe
8.
Well, at least 10, because they were married for a long time before me.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So she worked for probably the first 15 years of marriage. And so there was that. But so for 25 years, he took care of everything. And so when I understand that he divorced her. I saw that it was coming. I knew he wouldn't be able to caregive.
At some point, it feels like there should be a get out of jail free card for him over there.
Well, that's not really what I felt, but
I'm not saying that it's right. I'm just saying, like, you can see, like, oh, I can see why you'd go, oh, I'm done with this.
I have understanding and compassion on why it happened.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. But so, but in that, like, there was a lot of things he could have done to set him up for success.
Totally.
And could have done to set me up for success. Like, I begged him for years to go get in-home care for my mom.
Right.
Because it would have taken so much off of his shoulders.
Right.
I said, I know you're going to get burned out, and then this is all going to be put on my shoulders.
Yep.
So, and I was involved a lot in those with my mom and trying to mediate between my mom my whole life. So even there, but so when he divorced her, I remember a year after they got divorced.
You didn't seem very set up for success.
No, because he hadn't, he thought, oh, I can't handle your mom anymore. Here, you're 35 trying to figure out your life. Mm-hmm. You probably have, I'm about to retire. He is about to retire. I'm about to retire, but I don't have the capacity to handle her. But you're 35 and trying to do everything. This is a good time for you to have to do something that I don't have capacity for.
It feels like a pretty big jerk move the way it went down.
It feels like, but I, again, understand the goodness of his heart.
Right.
And this is what I like to say. I don't think my dad is a villain. Like, for this decision, I don't think he's a villain. But that I'm also not going to invalidate the pain it caused me.
Yeah.
Like, there has to be a place.
The pieces you were left to pick up for that decision.
I have to be able to hold that my pain matters and that I can have compassion on why he did it.
Again, going back to the idea that there is no villain, there is no superhero. There's just humanity. Messy people.
Yeah.
Right.
And so here I am, and I wake up and I'm having tons of anxiety, and I end up going and I have a conversation with Pizzi and her husband, Johnny, and they end up praying for me. And basically, I realized through that, oh, I have anxiety because I never felt like my dad was planning ahead. So career, you can change career at any given time. Took a lot of grace off the high stakes. But on the flip side, they weren't financially planning. I was always begging them to see a financial planner. I was always feeling scared about the debt that they had. They weren't being proactive about their life and moving forward. And so when the divorce happened, then there's all of this mess that I had to take care of. I had to mediate. I had to handle their financial issues. Like, so I'm feeling like you didn't think ahead and figure out a way to protect me, and you didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden I'm recognizing, not even noticing it, began to put that on God. Yep. Oh, God doesn't have a plan for me. He doesn't have a good future for me. No. Oh, he doesn't mind turning his back on me and everything going to to crap. Oh, he's actually going to leave me. Like I have to be hyper vigilant and see everything that's coming and make sure that I control everything. I need to make sure that I have a plan for everything in the future, because there's no way that I have a God that's going to help me in the future.
Yeah.
He's not looking ahead and protecting me. And so it was interesting because I'd spent so many years pulling my dad's face off God in the ways that he wasn't like him. We could do a whole podcast about good things about our dads too.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's why we're trying to actually hold both in this podcast.
Right.
Maya Angelou once said,
yeah,
my mother was not a good mother to a little child, but she was a good mother to an adult. And I kind of liked that because she was saying on both sides.
Basically saying mom failed miserably here
and was good,
but was beautiful and amazing over here.
Yeah.
And that's that tension. And a big part of this podcast, this conversation, is an enlightenment of the reality that there are problems, and then a truth that everything doesn't have to all be horrible.
Yes.
There's this beautiful thing. And so if we're willing to look at the problems and also understand the intention with that, there's love, there's care, and there's something redemptive, you can come out of this really amazing, because a lot of people are scared. Either it's all bad or it's all good, and there's no middle ground.
Absolutely. And to be honest, both me and you, when we started looking at our father pain, had to go into it's all bad for a little bit.
Yep. And that's part of it. There's part of the process that goes going back to the acknowledgement.
Yep.
You kind of said the steps: acknowledge, grieve, accept, heal. But the first step is there was problems. It wasn't perfect. For some people, all they saw was problems, and the acknowledgement begins with, hey, the truth is there was also love that was available.
Right.
But we just start with the acknowledgement.
Yeah, because it kind of depends what angle you're coming from. If you
does.
decide that your dad was the worst, then you would need to acknowledge the ways that he could have been loving you.
And
now, some dads, that's not possible.
Some dads, it's not possible. And you just
weren't
go,
there at
they
all,
weren't there,
or
they were unavailable. That's right. And we have to then grieve like, oh, I didn't even have a dad to even make a villain or a superhero out of. He just was non-existent.
Yeah. Which creates as many issues with God.
Yeah.
Even if your dad isn't bad, but is not there, it creates a disconnect. And that's something that I was saying earlier. So when I recognized, oh, I'm putting my dad on God's face. Well, I have emotional intelligence. I know that that's what we all do. And yet I still found myself there subconsciously.
Consciously always feeling this emotion.
Yes. And so I was able, recognizing it, to then take that off of God, and then I could feel connected to God again.
Now, let me say this. Now, adding to this, there may be fathers that did horrific things to you, to the family, that were like above and beyond. Like, we're not even going to go into what those scenarios could be.
There's some horrible things that can happen.
And we just go, that was actually so dark and horrible, but was there loving fathering that came through other people? And so part of that process as well is saying, when we talk about fathering and our fathers, we're not just talking about an individual, we're talking about an idea, a fathering idea. So there's tons of places where my dad didn't show up in fathering me well, but in the fathering category, I went to my history and said, okay, I can't see my biological dad in these moments, but I can see fathering from these men, from these mentors, from these peers, and I can begin to collect those and go, okay, fathering isn't actually the worst case scenario ever. There was love in fathering.
Yes. And I would say that is true. Like, a lot of healing for me happened from different men who fathered me in my world. And one of the things that got really tricky for us is, I remember I wanted a dad that would come fill all of my dad needs.
Yes.
And that is setting you up to be disappointed.
That is so unrealistic and impossible.
But it's a fantasy. We want to have one person who could come meet all of those needs. And and if you don't do it with a dad, you could do it with, I want a husband who will come meet all my needs, or I want a boyfriend who will come meet all my needs. Like, we want something to fill that void. And for me, recognizing like, okay, I get love moments. So I can be fathered by somebody who's my own age in a moment. But that they did something where they felt like they taught me something, or they were compassionate towards me, or it can be people like, I often feel fathered by this guy in my life who's in his 40s. I'm in my late 30s. Yeah. And so he's not old enough to be my dad, but he championed me. and
Yeah.
he believes in me. And that feels like a fathering.
Yeah, and I had that even in mothering, and we're not even talking about moms, but I've had mothering moments with. We have a mutual friend, was one of your close friends. She's in her early 40s, and she just loves me in certain ways that it just feels so motherly, and it's been part of the healing of my mother wounds and process.
So, go ahead.
Well, so acknowledging what really was, getting out from behind our denial, from behind our compartmentalization, so that we can grieve. Some of you aren't going to even know how to grieve. But when we begin, we go, oh, okay, I want to figure out how to grieve. So I went through a grieving process where I actually cried, got angry,
anger, sad.
Yeah. Hated my dad for a while, then went on a journey of forgiving dad.
Yes.
And then I went to an acceptance place where I began to accept, like, oh, this is just who my dad is. And I may never have the biological dad that I want.
Yeah.
Which, to be fair, my dad's like, many of the things that I just accepted him for where he was at have changed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, the things that I wanted to see from my dad are coming out. That's not a promise that that'll happen.
No.
There's just beauty in my situation.
But there's still a ton of things that you wish would have changed that haven't.
Totally.
And so the idea is you can't, and I would say this with my dad, when I stopped wishing he was different and I actually took a realistic estimate, like this is who you actually are. I'm not going to try to make you be better or worse. I actually like our relationship so much more. I feel so much more loved.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is just who you are. And once that happened, it was like, there was so much more freedom. And I think even the truth is my family falling apart really taught me something that I'm like, even if I just have a superficial conversation about gardening and the weather with you, but I can do that consistently, it feels great to know that I have someone that I can do that with.
Yep.
But when I was always disappointed and missing out all of the good things that could happen. So many people are blinded by what they want their relationship to be. So then they're always disappointed.
So they don't feel filled at all.
So they don't see what is.
Yes.
Like there is something that is. And even we were working with a client and he was so angry at his dad and had so much self-hatred at his dad that he couldn't see any of the ways his dad was loving him. And that's why acceptance is such a crucial part, because then you get to get the what is. Yeah.
As I talked to that client, I was like, dude, your dad's trying in all these levels. And I start going through it and I'm like, but you can't see it because you only want him to do this over here. And he goes, you're right. I haven't been able to acknowledge any of the love that he has to give. That must really devastate my dad. Yeah. I was like, yeah, you need to probably go acknowledge that to him. Yeah. That you can't accept the love that he does have to give. But inside of all of this, part of this is we realize that this is when it comes to fathering is a
freaking mountain.
It's a mountain to climb and to take on. And we oftentimes feel very powerless and out of control to even figure out how to navigate the healing process inside of fathering. And so,
especially because it affects our career, our emotions, our money, our sexuality, our romantic relationships, our self-confidence, how we relate to God and view him.
Identity, parenting, all of that. Like it literally is weaved into everything. And what it can feel like is just like when it gets exposed, we go, I feel so overwhelmed at the idea of even thinking about that and where it could be inside of my life that we just crash and we totally shut down.
And that's happened with you. When you realized you had dad issues, you didn't crash and shut down, but you're like, now what? We called everyone we knew. Like, what are good options? There's one book. They said, here's a book you could read. Yes. You'd already read it.
Yeah. And it wasn't actually that helpful.
For you. Some people it's really helpful.
Some people it's really helpful. For me, I was like, meh.
So
this isn't,
there was no outline of like, hey, here's how you can walk through dad issues. Here's how you can begin to tease it out. Here's how you can acknowledge it and grieve it and forgive it and heal. There was no roadmap.
Yeah. And that was one of the biggest things that I felt so disappointed on is like, I don't have a roadmap. Why is it like this? Why is there no roadmap that exists? So obviously it took years of us going through an emotional healing journey with our fathers.
Oh yeah. 11 years and counting.
Yep. 11 years and counting. And over the last couple of years, we've been actually developing what we call the Father Series. Yeah. And it's this mixture of taking and breaking down in the individual issues that are actually provoking a lot of our pain. And then it's equipping and creating tools for people to be able to navigate it.
Yeah. It helps you understand, it helps you connect dots of what was really affected me and what actually happened. And then it gives you so many practical tools on how to do healing. It has, and I love it because, listen, I designed it for me. Like I only design things I would enjoy doing is basically like my commitment to myself. And so I love listening to things because I can do it while I'm driving. I can do it while I'm doing my hair. I can do it when I'm doing the dishes. And so then I can really think about it. And then we made a workbook that then you can do after that. So I can listen, I can think, and then I can go write when I have time.
Right. And the one thing that we were really deliberate in this, again, because we're not the only ones with father wounds. Everybody has them. And
everyone.
It's one of the biggest things that people come into our office with, and they're wanting something that can actually take them deep. So when we created this workbook, we had over 200 and some hours into creating the questions and resculpting them.
Well, and we did, and we looked for, because we've worked with thousands of people, and this is inevitably, there's not one client I've had that we don't touch on dad issues.
Yep.
Not one. And so we have all these questions that we use to help unlock people, to help their mind shifts, mind shifts change.
Mindsets to shift and change.
Yes. And so we put all those, and then we have so many activations. I give my clients homework all the time. Like, here's movies to watch. Go be fathered by a movie. You can actually, you can let your pain come up, and then you can watch a movie where there's a good father in the movie, and you can actually watch that love and let it fill and comfort that part of you that is missing that. So we have all these activations, how to wipe your view of God clean.
To rewrite our view of God, rewrite our view of our history, to find healing in that. So basically what we did is ultimately this is a 12-part audio e-course, the Father series that we created. And with it comes this in-depth workbook that walks you hand, like it's almost like grabbing someone's hand and walking on a journey of healing. And we designed it to be like a 3-month course. It could be a 6-month course that you actually walk out because you take it 1 week at a time and just begin to process your journey. But we also designed it in a way where there's small group leaders guide, because one of the things that we believe is that in order to get healing for things like this, we need to do it inside of community. So we designed it in a way where you could gather around with 5 friends, 10 of you together, and listen to it individually, and then get together and actually share about the ahas and begin to process like where you got stuck inside of stuff. So we wanted it to be not only a thing that brought you healing, but gathered you together and united you in community rather than just be something that you isolate inside of.
Yeah, because we've seen so many people. We actually did a test run of this. We gave the Father series to a ton of people. We had them try out the questions, give us feedback on the questions. People loved it. I mean, loved it.
They came back and said it radically changed their entire life.
Yes, but they
over and over again.
loved doing it in community because it bonded them, especially men. Doing men's groups like this gets you to be vulnerable. But the thing I like about it, again, I don't make things I don't like. So we're laughing all the time. We're joking. Every episode is completely different. So you don't get like in a rut of hearing the same things. There's a million different tools. We have lots of different guests. William Paul Young, the guy who is the author of The Shack.
He was in it.
It is phenomenal. I mean, people weep when they hear that specific episode. I don't know anybody who isn't undone because you hear the heart of a father in a way that you rarely do.
Yep, absolutely. So also, this is the last thing we'll say about this. We created the Father series to be something that's financially viable. So we created at a price point that you can buy it. It's like the cost of a singular counseling session, but it actually does months and years. You could probably do a year
worth of counseling from this book.
Right.
What I mean is it covers the same amount that you would get in a year of counseling.
Right.
And it gives you the same amount of because we jam packed it so much because we want as many people to get access to healing as possible.
Yep.
And we're like, we can't meet with everybody for a year.
But I can create something that takes them to that type of depth and release them in on it. And release it not just to do it on their own, but to even find ways to do it together.
So I just wanted to tell them what the episodes are really quick, and then we'll end. I know we need to. But the importance of dialoguing about fathers, the attributes of a healthy father, the effects of fathers on their daughters, the effects of fathers on their son, finding wholeness after being hurt, confronting our fathers, hope for healing and connection, laying to rest our father wounds, stories of good fathers, returning to childlikeness, Father God, compassion for fathers, moving forward, steps to forgiveness. We have so many different things in this.
Entirely wholeness. It was meant to be an entire circle that gets you to the other side and goes, I feel actually really whole after deliberately diving into that.
And I just want to say one more thing.
Okay, one
more thing that we did is it's not just going to dredge up all the pain. We have a lot of healing things. We have a lot of ways that are helping you reconnect to love. So it's not just, hey, look at all these holes in your life and look at how they won't get filled. It's very empowering. So it's like, hey, if you don't know what to do with this pain, now you've acknowledged it, but you don't know what to do. We actually give you what to do.
A solution. And ultimately the goal was and the people who walked away from it walked away going, I feel more happy, more alive, more peace, more joy inside of my life. And that's what we wanted to do. Like you're going to go to dealing with some heavy things, but you're going to come out feeling so light on the other side if you progress through it. So
I didn't even mean to talk about it that much. I just really actually believe in it.
I'm excited about it. I won't push something that I'm not behind. And it's not just because we created it. It's powerful. So
we're doing pre-orders until
June 16th.
Father's Day.
Pre-orders right now. You can get on to justinandabby.com and there's a place to click on it, read more about it, and do the pre-order. You can save 10% on it right now.
Yeah.
And if you actually purchase the there's a bundle for small groups, a 5-pack where you can get it on that, and you can save right now up to $300 for a group of 5 if you jump on and do that. So that hopefully this is something that for some of you who have been having these problems go, okay, this gives me hope. There's actually access to something that's tangible for me to get through this stuff.
And I think that's our whole heart. That's why we created the podcast. We want to be able to help people in all the messy areas of life, like we had, where they don't feel alone and they don't feel like they have to figure it out by themselves. So that's our heart. That's what we want to do. That's why we're here. We want to we'll probably do like a mother's thing or whatever. But anyway, our heart is to be able to empower and see people get healed, as many as possible. Yeah. So thanks for joining us today on The Connected Life. Woo, 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 woo. We're the best around. No, nothing's ever gonna keep you down. Down, down.